Dr. Chanda.
I am
the Dr. Chanda.
And I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast, all things related to the Black culture.
Got the doctor in front of your name.
Hey, what's up, everybody? You are now tuned in to the Paging Dr. Chanda show. I'm your host, licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Chanda, your favorite psychologist and your mental health bestie. Listen, it is my goal to bring to you relatable and fun, practical content. Here, we unpack the issues that impact our community the most, and today's episode is extra special because we had to drizzle a little bit more sauce on it because we're deep diving into a conversation that is long overdue. Today, we are hopping into Black History Month even more, and we are talking about texturism and colorism and what it means to reclaim our roots by returning to Africa. These are issues that have shaped our perception and our relationships, even our opportunities in life. Did you know that studies have shown that individuals with darker skin tones and coarser hair texture face more discrimination, not just in the world at large, but even within our own communities? This isn't just a social media conversation, this is real life. And today, we are breaking all of this all the way down with my very special guest. So we're gonna hop into today. I am beyond excited to have a conversation with my homegirl, my psychologist friend, my business bestie, my sister, Dr. Afiya Mbilishaka. Now, if you don't mind, Dr. Afiya, can you introduce yourself to the people?
Yes, I can. Hi, people. My name is Dr. Afiya Mbilishaka. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm a hairstylist. And so I've developed something called psychoHairapy, which is using hair as an entry point into mental health. So I love all things hair, health, and especially Black history. So I'm excited to be here.
Yes, that's actually how we connected because we're both licensed psychologists and licensed cosmetologists. Like, we love hair. We love all the beauty things, and, you know, we smart a little bit.
A lot of it. But I have to.
You know, I'm not going to humble myself in this area. A lot of it.
Yeah, and I'm not licensed as a cosmetologist. Got to clarify that. I don't want to get in any trouble.
And I recently became a psychotherapist. So can you explain to the people what that entails? This is your certification that you provide.
Yes. So the psychotherapy certification is basically helping people to apply mental health first aid when it comes to the hair care experience. So it's broken down into three parts. The first part is going over the history of our hair. So I go through thousands of years of hair history so that we can have a proper understanding of where we came from. And then the second part is focused on the signs and symptoms of mental health issues in communities of color, right? What's taught in the textbooks is not necessarily what's showing up in the chair. And so for us to really understand, right? And then the last part is getting into micro counseling skills. So how can you assess someone for harm to themselves or other people, active listening skills, how to refer someone to a therapist. So all of that. It's a long process, but a very pleasurable, engaging certification process.
When I tell you my head was just like spinning with all the information you provided during the psychotherapy training, like it was, I'm so happy that I got certified. So if any hairstylists out there, salon owners, you guys have clients in your chair who talks about like mental health and issues or what have you, y'all need to be certified in psychotherapy. So you need to hit up my girl.
Please.
Awesome. So now before we deep dive, let's break this down a bit for folks who may not have any idea about these concepts regarding texturism and colorism. These are concepts that I still get a lot of questions about even today. So based on your research and overall the work that you've done in this area, what specifically would you say in regards to hair texture? How does that impact how we're treated in communities?
Yeah, I definitely think that certain hair textures or even styles with those textures are seen as professional versus unprofessional. And I think that it can impact the opportunities we have with our education and job opportunities, even housing. So that's where there's like a lot of movement towards things like the Crown Act, because we notice that there are cases of discrimination based on texture. But there definitely has origins in slavery, right? To understand that people who had looser hair textures tended to have domestic tasks in the house, cleaning houses, doing laundry, cooking, versus the people who had more tightly hair textures basically were mandated to be on the field, outside, picking cotton, these sort of things. And so there actually was a division of labor based on hair texture that I don't think we've actually healed from, and it can still get applied now.
Wait, so I want to go back to something you said. You said there's even hair discrimination and in colorism that impacts us in housing.
Yes.
Oh
So
my gosh.
that's what the Crown Act specifically. So creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. They were noticing that people were being denied housing opportunities based on their appearance, specifically their hairstyle and texture, in terms of people who were showing up to leasing offices with locks or braids being denied in their application. Mhm.
My goodness. Okay. So, as a psychologist, I know this is what you do, right? So you research these things, you provide the statistics regarding these things. So it impacts us related to housing, it impacts us with our jobs. What are some things you can tell us in regards to the school system? Like, how does it impact maybe Black girls or even Black boys regarding colorism and texturism, how they're treated in the education systems?
I would actually say that's the most documented space. I think sometimes when it comes to employment, there are certain protections that, in law in terms of equal hiring, but in school, that the socialization process around what's good and bad hair plays out so much, not only by peers, right, in terms of being critical or bullying, but even my research suggests that teachers participate in it, literally treating children differently based
Wow.
on their hairstyle and texture. And so I did a research study called the Hair Health and Heritage Study, where I interviewed people while they were getting their hair done. And a lot of people told stories about teachers or administrators at school mistreating them or enforcing an unfair or biased hair policy that impacted them because they had braids or locks. So it comes
Wow.
up.
Okay. Okay. So and I know that the team, y'all probably getting frustrated with me because I just be when they say things like this, I just be wanting to hop all over the place, and I'm going off script right now. Okay, what are some mental health things that can come about this though, Dr. Afiya? Because we're saying when we send our babies to school and they're being mistreated by teachers, principals, and educators based on how their hair might be or how dark their complexion might be, what does that do to their mental health?
Oh gosh, it triggers significant anxiety, social anxiety specifically, right? Social anxiety is having this fear of being judged. Well, they are being judged. And so it's creating more opportunities to question who you can trust. Depression actually came up, right, in terms of not feeling like they had worth or value. Because they were so diminished by the people who were supposed to care for them. Other data suggests, just trying to think about just lowered self-esteem. That comes up a lot too, right? In terms of having a core sense of self, that we get affirmations based on our appearance. And when you're being criticized or mistreated, then we also internalize that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what I love, Dr. Afiya? So I love how your work with psychotherapy is actively helping people to heal from this. Can you talk a little bit more about our relationship with our hair and continued connection of mental health? Like, how can we continue to reaffirm ourselves regarding hair and mental health?
Okay, it's complex, but
Yeah.
I think one of the first steps that we can do is to understand our earliest hair memories.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, our earliest memories in general really set the foundation for how we understand ourselves now and even in the future. And so I do encourage people to think about their childhood hair experiences and how it impacted them, and if they have or haven't addressed their needs of their like inner child.
Wow.
So some people have positive hair experiences growing up, and so that can continue on. But those who had bullying or were tender-headed and it was very painful, or if there were just again lots of within family concerns or mistreatments, that I think that we really have to dedicate time to honoring our hair, really studying it, spending time looking in the mirror, understanding how your hair interacts with certain products, not forcing it to do things that it does not want to do. There's actually a
That part.
psychological construct called hair stress. And this was developed by Dr. Evelyn Winfield Thomas. And she said hair stress basically is persistent and improper hair care practices that cause psychological and physical consequences. So it's not something about team natural or not. Literally, if you are forcing your hair to do something that it does not want to do, it will leave you. It will say goodbye, I'm out of here, right? It literally will fall out of your head if you're missing. And so I think that a big part of addressing hair stress is really self-study. Like a key to mental health overall is self-knowledge, but when it comes to a key to mental health and hair, to really know what your hair can do and really honoring all the uniqueness of it. Now, this might be saying affirmations around your hair. This could be journaling or drawing. These are different things of that we use in general to take care of our mental health, but honoring our hair specifically.
So when you say like hair stress, and we have our sisters who, and this is no shade to anybody, but when we're like putting the edges, the glue on our edges and like tight braids and stuff like that, and it's pulling on our hair, are we saying that contributes to like that hair stress that you're talking about?
Yes. And I want to be mindful that everyone wants to look good. It's part of our culture to want to look good. Like we are an adorned people. Like we go to Africa, people's hair, all types of styles.
For sure.
But the issue is who is deciding what looking good is? Who decides that? And so I think a lot of times in terms of American society and culture, the media plays a big role, whether it's film or television, but also social media, right? What are setting the standards? And oftentimes those standards are something in my research lab we call unrealistic advertised norms. So unrealistic advertised norms in terms of people flaunting all different types of hairstyles that no one could actually achieve because they aren't actually achieving. That model or that actress, that's not even her hair, and she has a whole glam squad and all of these different things. So even working on, you probably have this experience where people come with a picture, I want to look like this, and it's like that person doesn't even look like that. So I think that can create stressful experiences because the standards are, again, so unrealistic.
To your point about like these unrealistic standards, and we're kind of comparing ourselves to people who they don't even look like this. It recently came out that the girls on the relaxer boxes when we was growing up, they wasn't even using the relaxers that they was advertising. These girls had silk presses, but advertising just for me, like that was what was in their head. I was just taken aback. I don't know, Doc. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually had an article that originally was named Just for Me and talked about like kitty perms because oftentimes when Black girls get a relaxer, it was not their decision. Even though I begged my mom for one, she said no, but it wasn't their decision. It was their mother's decision, right? And even thinking about like the incentive because of the marketing, a lot of people said like I saw the Just for Me commercials or the boxes and I wanted to look like that. So I begged my mom to get a relaxer, but then their hair didn't come out looking like that because those people didn't actually have a relaxer. So psychology, right?
Right, the psychology of marketing and oppression. Jeez. Okay, so I'm on the couch right now because this is fitting. I'm about to open up and tell my story. So, Doc, okay. So growing up, right, so we were in that era of relaxers and perms, and your hair had to be straight in order for it to be acceptable. My mother, like yours, she didn't necessarily allow us to, and my mom never really, abided to like beauty standards. She was gorgeous, but she didn't really feel a need to put on excessive makeup and weaves and stuff like that. She just never did that. So we weren't really allowed to like get relaxers. We didn't get a weave until like teenage years. But because we were growing up in a society where people did do that, it was like, oh, y'all need a relaxer. Or like, oh, what's going on with your hair today? And looking back on my high school pictures, I'm like, dang, my hair was so thick and full and long. Like, why did I like even believe the things that other people may have been saying who had their own things going on? Because it really is just internalized racism, internalized oppression, like results of colonization. And I think that just like you said, we need to get to a place where we're able to affirm ourselves and to affirm our children, to understand that our hair is beautiful the way it is. Yes, we want to look good, and also our natural hair looks good. Like we don't have to go through excessive amounts of things in order to be beautiful. So that's my story.
But it's interesting how our peers play a big role in understanding what our we are, because I do think our peers become agents, specifically agents of white supremacy, right? If you've ever seen the movie The
That part.
Matrix, like the first one, that anyone could turn into an agent at any moment. I don't know if people remember that part, that somebody just walking down the street, the lady in the red dress could turn into an agent and enforce the system on someone. I think it's true when it comes to even hair and beauty that we've all internalized, not on purpose, but subconsciously, these standards. And when somebody is out of line or not conforming, that we even enforce it ourselves.
Mm. Agents of white supremacy. That's a word, Doc. That is a word. So, as we're talking about the things that we internalize throughout life, how we can go about healing, I want to bring up the concept of returning to our roots and returning to Africa. And so, speaking of unlearning and healing, I want us to talk more about our upcoming voyage to Egypt. So, y'all, me and Dr. Afiya are literally going to Egypt in December the 12th through the 20th. And we believe that this is going to be a time of healing, a time of change, where we can receive those affirmations. Doc, can you tell us a bit more about the healing nature of going back to Africa? What does that mean? You did a whole PowerPoint presentation on Monday, so I just want a snippet for the people.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because a lot of Black psychologists have led trips back to Africa. It is not only a physical journey, but an emotional journey of returning, right? Our ancestors were stolen, were robbed, taken away from our ancestral home. And I do think that it is a psychological imperative for all people of the African diaspora to visit Africa, to reconnect, literally, like you're saying, to our roots. So many psychologists have done this, whether Dr. Asa Hilliard, he would take people to Ghana and to Egypt so that people could reconnect with their culture. Dr. Maria Cambone, the first time I went to Africa was with Dr. Maria Cambone. She's a clinical psychologist. I went to Ghana. She had a trip called the Sankofa Journey. Sankofa means go back and fetch it. So go back to the best of our past and to be able to apply it to today now. And so that is a big part of my intention, of taking people to Africa, because I don't think that you can be healthy, whole, without having that connection to your culture.
We can't be healthy and whole without having that connection. That is a word, Doc. And even, you were talking about how, like Marcus Garvey, his whole philosophy is that, like, yeah, go ahead and talk more about that.
Okay, Black History Month. Yeah, where am I at? I'm with Paige and Dr. Shah. Okay, let me bring my Black history with me. Okay. So we can think back to people like Martin Delany. He predates Marcus Garvey. Sometimes people think Marcus Garvey was the one who first said Africa is for the Africans. Marcus Delany did that years before. He really was part of this immigration society that argued that during our enslavement in the United States, that Black people should have the opportunity to go back. So he did a lot of research. He traveled there. He studied ethnic groups. He was able to find his lineage and ancestry, I believe, of the Mandinka people. So to even think about, he was making this argument during slavery, like, this is ours, and all people of the diaspora should have access to Africa. And so Marcus Garvey continued with that movement, creating the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And so before there was any Instagram, before there was X, before there was TikTok, he was able to communicate his messages and built thousands and thousands of organized Black folks together to try to get back to Africa. It's sad because of US government infiltration, he never actually got to go to Africa, but his ex-wife, Amy Ashwood Garvey, actually got to go back and did all this work around Pan-Africanism, going to conferences, and she found the particular ethnic group, which was the Akan of Ghana, that her family was stolen from. And when she went, she changed her name from Amy to Akosawa. From that day on, she only wore African clothes and continued to build amongst African people. So it is transformative to go. Just thinking, the movie Roots had a big impact on Black people going back to Africa, because before that, there really was no depiction of Africa being a beautiful, healthy place. It had rituals, customs, socialization, foods, dances that were special, unique, and honorable. And so I realized that the premiere of Roots, the miniseries in the 1970s, they actually did research on a psychological level after that movie came out to see how this motivated African Americans to find their ancestors, to have family reunions, but also to take trips back to Africa.
So it literally improves our psyche when we go back to Africa.
Yeah, that there is so much that comes from the travel experience, but also just thinking about what happens when you learn about Black history and knowledge. It literally transforms your mind. Your brain chemistry is altered. So Dr. Asa Hilliard did research on this because he studied schools and he saw that children who were exposed to African history specifically performed better in school. They had higher self-esteem, lower levels of depression. And then, I'm sorry, this work was continued by Dr. Colette Chapman Hilliard, who's a professor, and she today is still doing research on this topic about literally having Black history as a mental health intervention, where people again have lower rates of anxiety and depression by learning facts about the challenges and the achievements of African people.
That literally goes hand in hand about on the research that talks about racial socialization, like as a protective factor from race-based traumatic stress and all the depressive things that we might experience as a result of racism and discrimination being here in America.
Absolutely. And I think that a big part of positive racial socialization includes learning about Africa, right? Sometimes people are so focused on our race, but I'm Black. I'm blackity black, like I'm Black, but it's a different ideology to say I'm African, because Black, as Dr. John Henrik Clarke would say, Black doesn't have a language or a land. Versus when you identify as African, there's languages, culture, land that you can go back to. So Black doesn't have like, oh, I'm Black, so I go to this place, but I'm African, therefore I belong to this place.
So what can people expect from our trip? What are some things that they can expect to get into?
A lot. Well, of course, you get to spend time with us together, which is
yes.
But there's going to be a lot of information about African history, specifically the role of Egypt or ancient Kemet in understanding psychology. So even the word psychology is actually a Kemetic concept. Saku means the soul or the spirit. So oftentimes we think from the Eurocentric perspective that psyche is the mind. And so your study, psychology is the study of the mind. But when you look at Kemetic principles, we understand that psychology is the study of the spirit or the soul. So we're going to get into the roots and origins of psychology, which we all benefit from, even if you're not a psychologist, right? To understand how your mind works and how your spirit and soul works, but also thinking about the technologies that existed back then too, where our ancestors basically created these mind maps for us to understand and grow deeper into our self-knowledge. Whether we study the Wolof of Senegal or the Yoruba from Nigeria or the Kan from Ghana, all of them identify having origins or connections to ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet. So by going to Egypt, we're actually getting a range of origin stories in there. And so I think that we need to all, just like how I said, understand your earliest memories of hair, we need to understand earliest memories of psychology and wellness. We're going to do workshops. I personally am going to be leading a workshop on Mayat. Mayat is an Egyptian deity or goddess of truth, justice, balance, harmony, reciprocity. And so going into how these ancient Kemetic principles can actually help us to engage in self-care and mental health care today. So there's going to be some yoga, there'll be meditation, but of course, actually seeing the world in this new light. And there's going to be lots of good food and panels, lots of Instagrammable opportunities too.
Yes, and we will have a photographer so you can get all the content.
Yes, it doesn't count if there's no picture of it, right? You have to get your picture taken by the pyramids of Giza or by the Sphinx. Like I'm going to be having a whole photo shoot out there. So just to be clear, me myself, like I'm going to be probably taking 1,500 pictures. So.
I plan to do that too, Doc. So tell us about some things you got coming up, how we can follow you, what ways can we support you?
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I'm always doing these psychotherapy trainings. We do them monthly. And I'm also introducing a digital asynchronous class as well because I know people's schedules are very busy. So if you go to psychotherapy.org, you can see the listing of all the different dates that I'm doing these trainings. And again, the training is for whether you're a stylist or a therapist or an educator or a parent, and you want to understand the connection between hair and mental health. I'm also having a workshop coming up on how to create support groups in the salon or barbershop space. So even if you're not a stylist or barber, but you just want to hold a support group, I give strategies. Dr. Chanda and I have done lots of groups together. So sharing some of our techniques and strategy and group dynamic and facilitation. What else do I have coming up? I think I'll leave it with those, but the website is always being updated, and I am open to taking new therapy clients too, and my private practice, my psychological services.
So that means that y'all need to be reaching out to Dr. Afiya for all your mental health needs. Listen, Doc, it was always a pleasure having you on. We just had a powerful conversation. We talked about texturism, colorism, and the ways they impact our overall mental health. But we also talked about healing, self-acceptance, and the power of reconnecting with our roots. If you took anything from this episode, let it be this: our beauty, our history, and our worth are not up for debate. We are enough just as we are. And Dr. Afiya, again, thank you so much for joining the show. And before we go, I want to remind y'all that you have the power to create the emotions that you want to experience. God bless. And don't forget to tune in next week to the Dr. Chanda Show.